So this week we're going to head on over to Imperial Lounge and sit down with my friend Mr. Blair Bondy. Blair's an audio engineer that I first met playing with the Dirty River Band over at the Dominion House. He's since gone on to do regular audio engineering for Post Malone as well as a number of other major names. When we get back from the other side of this quick message, we'll get down to our interview with audio engineer and my friend, Mr. Blair Bondy. This and every episode of the AVB Podcast is brought to you by our incredible sponsors. Make sure you find links for them, today's guest, and of course all our other social media down in the description below. You can comment, ask questions that you think we might have missed, and of course don't forget to subscribe and click on that bell to make sure you're getting notifications of all our episodes. Alright, let's get to it. No, we don't even need to do that shit anymore. Really don't. Fucking computers are so good now.
Oh, you got like a software or something, or you just try
Literally select the video file, select the audio file, it goes, synchronize, it goes, boop, done.
Really?
Yep.
Damn.
Yeah, it's awesome.
And you're recording 48K on here?
Mm-hmm.
Oh shit, you're not.
No.
That's something you should switch.
What's happening?
So, because of the way...
This is our guest, Blair Bondy. Go ahead. Tell me.
Because of the way cameras capture frames,
yep.
If you're recording audio and locking it to video, you would want to have the audio sample rate at 48K, and right now it's actually at 44.1. So what you'll notice will happen is even if you did a sync slate, had it perfect,
right?
If
by
it's
the
a
time
long
you get to
interview,
the end,
yeah, even not even super long, like 8-9 minutes, you would notice a small drift. I learned this when I was trying to link up. I had one of these and I had a GoPro. I was on the cruise ship and I was mixing and I tried to make a cool video.
Right.
And the soundboard was recording at 48 or 96, which is just like a multiple. But my Zoom was recording at 44.1, so my audience mic wouldn't line up no matter what.
Right.
It didn't matter because it was an audience mic, so I lived with it. But I was like,
it's interesting because I have done a couple interviews with this and I have done the sync, and I haven't spent enough time probably looking to make sure specifically at the end that it's good. I have a feeling that at this point the software is good enough that it kind of might make a...
It might, but it would be a warping thing. Like,
yeah.
I don't know.
I'll have to look to find out, but we'll check that out for sure. But here's the thing. Yeah, I'm going to let that entire conversation go out to the audience because it really sort of is a good introduction to our guest, Blair Bondy. How's it going, dude? Yeah. Mustache and applauds for himself. So we know the kind of person.
So we know he's a douche.
I'm glad you said it.
Oh,
no, I love it. Speaking of douche, the funny thing about this is that you and I have already sat down for this conversation before.
Yes.
And unfortunately, you are one of 2 episodes in our history that we just completely lost. We have no idea what happened to the footage. We went one day to go put it together and it was gone. But as it turns out, that might have been to our advantage.
Maybe.
So let's see how this conversation goes a little bit.
Job.
Yeah, it was not, I promise. But
it's cool if it is.
Let's start from the very beginning. Where did you grow up?
I was born in Windsor. Spent I think the first 10 years in Windsor, then moved to Bell River, which if you don't know, it's just half an hour away. And then I lived there for most of elementary school, the high school, and then I moved to LaSalle recently.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
just Windsor, Essex.
Growing up, what was family life like? What did mom and dad do, that kind of thing?
My mother worked at a school for a little bit. Then she started her own business cleaning houses, which actually did very well. Mm-hmm. And then she moved on eventually to work in the mailing department, I believe, of Vistaprint.
Oh,
I'm sure people listening to this, someone knows someone from there. I worked there for a minute.
Right.
Yeah, and then my dad was a 30-something year veteran at Ford's.
Oh, cool. So music, a big part of the family growing up?
Yeah, my father was, he was in bands when he was younger, and even later in his life, he continued to play drums at our church band. Okay. Which is actually kind of how I got into sound. And even now, he's not in the church band and he's retired. He still has a jam band that he plays with. And everyone's always at our house because it's harder to move the drums, right? So he has a jam band or 2. I think right now he's just got the one band, but they come over and blow the doors off the place.
That's awesome, man. So did you play any instruments growing up at all?
Yep. I started off on drums. was big into that for like maybe I don't know. I probably started at age of 5 and went all the way from 5 until now. But like I took it most seriously when I was 5 until 10.
Right.
And then I switched to like guitar.
Okay.
Or bass was somewhere in the middle of that.
Right. So you messed around with a little bit of everything then, right?
Yeah, and then guitar was like my kind of main thing for a long time. And that's like what I play the most now, but I honestly don't play a lot.
So
it's kind of sad.
Talk to me about your process, because you said it was through the church. Talk to me about your process getting into sound engineering.
So there was this like kind of growing pains area or section of time at the church where they were really growing, and they wouldn't be able to fit as many people as they had room for in the main sanctuary. So they had to like start a new room, and that was also right around the same time the head music pastor was kind of passing on the torch to a younger music pastor. And so like that whole band that was in the main room moved down to like the smaller room with that same pastor, and then like the new younger guy kind of took over.
Okay.
So they had this thing, they called it simulcast. It was like it had their own separate worship bands, but then once worship was done, the people in the big room would watch the pastor speak, and the people in the small room would watch a camera feed of the room down the hall.
Okay.
And all that stuff. Anyways, when my dad started doing that, I just kind of got interested in it.
What was the first thing that sort of took your interest from it?
It happened even before that, like when I was probably when I got my first guitar when I was like 10, or something like that. I was always really fixated on the amp.
Okay.
And the sound. A lot of guys, like, I never got it growing up. I would see like people like doing YouTube covers or something, and I'd watch like guys who had like a PRS or something real nice guitar, and they'd have like a crappy amp, and I never got it. I was always like the opposite, and I was so far opposite. Like I wouldn't even buy a nice head and plug it into a crappy cabinet.
Right.
I would buy like the cabinet before the head. Like I had crappy amps and stuff, but like every time I upgraded, it was in like it was in a certain way that I felt was the most important to the sound.
Right.
And I was always trying to fiddle with tone and get the best sound and stuff. And then,
do you remember the first time you sort of became fascinated with that part of it? Or do you have like at least, not the first time, but at least like a real signpost memory for you?
I know the moment that I decided I wanted to do sound for a living.
Okay.
That was later on. So skip all of that. I did sound at the church, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And with my brother's band, hopping around Windsor to the bars. I wasn't even old enough to get in, but I would go and like do sound.
Right.
Didn't know what I was doing. The moment though that I knew that like I really wanted to do it, I went to. It's actually super weird. The morning started off with me going to that church and doing sound for Bob Probert's funeral.
Ooh,
that was the morning. That's not the moment.
Right.
And then I rushed home. I had to beat like the crowd because they had a really long,
funeral procession.
So yeah, I had to like have someone take over because I had to go, and I was like, I'm gonna leave. I don't want to cut these people off,
Right.
I went home, showered, and then me, my dad, and my friend and his dad went to Sarnia for Bayfest.
Okay.
And it was 2010. I don't remember the date, but we went and saw Rush, and we got pretty close. I think we stayed in line for 3 hours, and then you got in and you waited like 3 hours before they played, and then they played for like 2.5, 3 hours.
Wow.
Horrible on my feet, but
right.
I just remember hearing them when we got close and we were like looking for something to eat earlier in the day. I could hear them sound checking, and it was probably virtual sound check. I don't know if it was actually them,
right?
But that was like cool, and I kind of knew what was going on. I remember even hearing them turn off the tops, and they're only playing the subs, and I could hear the subs only, and I kind of knew like he's doing that to test this or whatever.
Right.
And then we got into the show, and it was just such a good sounding show. I was really close, so I wasn't even hearing like the main PA mix. I was hearing like the little front speakers they have for the like front 2 rows.
Right.
Tons of sub though. I was on the side of the stage that Neil's biggest gong drum is on. So
okay.
He would hit that thing and just blow you apart. But it was a combination of that concert, and I also went and saw a Steve Miller Band with Peter Frampton in like I think 2010 as well with my dad and a bunch of people.
Right.
And that was like again, I wasn't even in the meat of the audience listening to the main PA. I was far back and listening to like the delays they had at DTE, which are just whatever, I don't know what they are.
Right.
But I just remember hearing how good it sounded, and I just like blew my mind. Like the toms were like, I always say like gooey or juicy, like it just sounded like they were dripping with water, just like doo when you play like Fly Like an Eagle.
Right.
Do 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 do, and it just seemed like the tom roll kept going and going and going,
Right.
and it just sounded so fucking good, and I was just like, I don't know, that was one of the moments where I was like, I want to do this. That's all it came down to. I just love hearing things sound good. And not
It's
like
so
shit.
funny to me because like you're at, especially because it comes at a concert for you, right? So like most of the people who would be sitting at that concert having any sort of like, you know, one of those ethereal like, oh, I need to be this moment, is not thinking about the fucking sound guy.
No, not the floor tom at all, but I like the floor tom.
Right. do you have any idea why, like what that was? Like,
Not a clue, man.
Yeah?
Well, I mean, at an early like age, I really wanted to be a rock star, obviously, and like, I don't know if it was like a crippling piece of information or something, but something told me like, it's probably not gonna happen.
Right.
You should figure out a way to get into this without actually being into it.
Right.
Because I get to work with people that are sometimes famous, but might not always be.
Right.
And it's weird because you're just the sound guy, but in certain ways your career is more certain or guaranteed than theirs. All I have to do is not fuck up, and I'm not going to get fired.
Right.
But they might be gone the next year, so it's cool in certain ways. But I basically just wanted to stick around the environment of music, but I wanted to not be gambling so much.
Right.
I figured if I learned how to do something,
Was that
I
actually
would get hired,
that actually part of your calculation with it though? Like, was that
Sort
a
of.
thought process, or is that just a happy consequence?
That was like a minor thing, but it just happened. I happened to also fall in love with sound, so I was
Right.
like, "There's no way I'm not gonna pursue this."
So the first time, because I'm very interested in your arc, because the first time you and I met was, and I especially because of where this story gets to go eventually, I love this story.
Yeah.
The first time you and I met, you were doing sound for a really low key band, mine. And we had a bit of a nightmare that night.
Yeah. I don't have many of those, but that was one of them.
Yeah. Where were you in your sort of career at that point? Like, were you already started working on tours and that sort of thing? Were you just helping out that night, or?
Probably not tours,
Right.
but definitely one-offs with a company out of Detroit. Like at that point, I think I had mixed, like at the Fox Theater.
Oh, okay.
Or like 4,000. Like I'd done that, but I wasn't doing it super often. Or maybe I was touring at that point, but it definitely wasn't music, like straight up band artist touring. I might have been in the middle of like just getting off of a theater tour. I did a couple of plays.
Right.
But it's funny how that works though, because like a gig's a gig.
Yeah.
Right now I'm happy to not be taking gigs because I literally just got home from 2.5 months. It took a week off, and then I went out for 11 days, and now I just got back and I only have 9 days off. So like I'm literally like going to the doctors, like just I'm happy to not take gigs
Just the
right now, but I'm not
shit.
above it by any means.
Right.
And anyone who thinks they are needs to get a grip.
So I want to tell this story just because it's so funny, and because it wasn't your fault, and that's the whole thing. There was a major equipment issue, is what it came down to, and I played, or the band played, the entire set with no PA whatsoever. So which means no vocals from me whatsoever until like the last song, and it was equipment malfunction and stuff.
Yeah.
But it was like. It was very early on, even in my sort of like performance career. So like I'd never experienced anything like that before.
That sucks.
But it was, I thought it was one of the coolest experience ever, because what I loved about that night is that you busted your ass the entire, you didn't stop the entire time that we were performing.
Oh, you never give up.
And neither did we. Like I sang without I think we sang with no PA whatsoever for like the first 3 songs, and then we were able to spin a monitor around so we had a little bit of vocal bleed or something.
Mind you, for any professional friends listening, this was a show where I was filling in as a house guy at a bar.
Right.
With a I believe it was an amp rack that was very dusty or something.
It was.
And I was literally just filling in my first time, I think, ever at that venue. Might have been.
Really?
I've been there, but not as a sound person.
Right.
Yeah, that sucked. But like you said, you don't stop. You never give up.
I love that story that night. I'm a big fan. Quit looking at the sound shit. But
I'm like, is this thing working? Shit,
yeah, no, I keep looking at it. No, but I love that story, if for nothing more than just the fact that it really talks about the part of artistry and musicianship and professionalism that I love, and that's the show must go on idea. Because it would have been really easy to go like, oh well, there's no PA, we're not going to start playing until there's a PA. But fuck that, there's 2 other bands that have to get on, and there's people standing in the audience. Like, we got to give them something, right?
That's a good way to think about it. Because even though that was a small show and there's not really a stage manager, I guess Chris would be the stage manager.
Right.
You got to keep it going.
Yeah.
There's a deadline. We have to be done.
Right.
You know. So that
do you have any of those sorts of like stories? Like, have any of those nightmare moments?
I just had a nightmare the other day in Ireland.
Okay.
It didn't end like that. It ended up actually being a happy ending. But
ours was a happy ending. We got one song with PA.
Mine was like happy ending though. Like in the grand scheme of things, everything was okay.
Right.
So I know we haven't touched base on this yet, but I'm working with Post Malone right now. You know this. They might not.
Right.
We just did a 12-day Euro trip. And I think it was like the second last show. Yeah, was in Ireland, and we rent consoles every day because we can't carry them on the planes because it was literally like one country a day. It was a shit show. So we, advance and rent the consoles and make sure the stuff we need is there. And we get to the show in Ireland, and I think we got there like 4 or 5 hours before our set. And again, it was a day where we full-blown rented because the house gear was not what we wanted. Mm-hmm. So we had like access to our stuff very early in the day. And from the get-go, we were having issues. I actually was 100% fine, but the way we had our stuff set up, my board, I mixed the monitors on the stage, and my partner, Joe, mixes the front of house. Mm-hmm. The way it was set up, our 2 boards were sharing a brain basically, and one of the 2 outputs was broken, which was the one going to him. So the whole time I was setting up and line checking, he was just thinking that there was a stall in like the line check. Meanwhile, I was actually getting the lines, he just hadn't seen them. Eventually we figured out, okay, something's really wrong. What do we do? So I call over the tech, because when you rent stuff, unless it's a dry rental and there's like no tech, the guy's going to be on site to help you. So that guy comes over and I'm like, hey man, this is what's happening. Let's see what we can do. And he starts trying to fix it. He's hitting the wall, and then he's like, we tested it at the shop, everything worked, it must be your file that you loaded, which is a common thing if you have a messed up file or you don't know what you're doing. You could have an issue. Problem was the specific error we were having, I knew it was not my problem or Joe's problem at front of house. So this guy was like trying to fix it, and he was on the phone with tech support, 50,000 people in the background, band playing, not like waiting on us, but like just loud, and it's hard to hear your phone.
Right.
And eventually he looked at me and he goes, I give up, I don't know. And he walked away, and I never saw him again. So I had 2 or 3 hours at that point, probably 2.5 hours until our set at that point, or until our changeover. And so I literally looked at the back of the console at the phone number, like dialed it, called the people that he was probably talking to, myself, and I was like, all right, what do we do? And the guy had me run a series of tests to determine what was the problem, and basically he said, this is broken. If there's 2 of you guys sharing one brain, you got to rock, paper, scissors. One of you guys gets the console, the other one of you has to take the house gear.
Right.
And we never rock, paper, scissors. The front of house guy, Joe, just fucking commandeered.
Right.
Even though his was the console that wasn't getting any of the lines. Right. So basically, I just swapped his line with mine. He got all of his crap, and I had to run over and mix on a console I hadn't seen in probably 3 years. And it's so old, it doesn't take a USB. It takes a PCM, CIA, whatever card.
Right.
It's like this big.
Yeah.
So I had to go up to that thing. Mind you, it's still an hour out from the show, so I had an hour to label my stuff, check my lines, and it ended up turning out fine. The show was completely okay, but it was just like so funny. Like I was on the phone with tech support. My production manager said, this is the time that you have to say you're going to go to the house gear.
Right.
I want you to go on tech support until this time. If you don't have it at your desk by this time, we're going to switch and you're going to have to put your efforts towards making the other stuff work.
Right.
And I was literally looking at my watch like 1 minute away from that time, and I felt like a paramedic just giving CPR and just realizing this guy's not coming back. I was like, I literally said to the guy, he was like, okay, try this now, try this. And I was like, Matt, I gotta go.
Right.
Like hung up the phone. It was like this like crazy like thing, but everything was fine. I mean, if you can't adapt, you're not gonna continue to have a career. But
let's kind of walk through the story. You gave away the punchline a little bit. That's okay. Well, the Post Malone thing, but you're going from damn. But to my knowledge of you, and I know you've done some stuff before that, but like you go from mixing, poor equipment at the DH, whatever, and just trying to get it through, to within 3 years mixing for one of the biggest names on the planet right now. Tell me about that story. How does that go?
So I started off like my professional career on cruise ships, which is, I guess, one of the maybe like 5 typical ways to start or something.
Okay. Like literally just applied for an ad in the newspaper? Like I've seen those ads too, right?
Not for newspaper, but I mean basically like I got out of college and I wanted to make, it was like audio college. I wanted to make like money for a year. So I went and worked at like a factory, and I told them, I was like, I'm only gonna work here for a year. I'm gonna be loyal, I'm gonna be a good worker, but I'm telling you, in a year I'm gone. I'm gonna go do sound on a cruise ship. The guys are like, okay, like look at me weird.
Right.
Like sure enough, I think 11 months into it, I finally got the call back, and I just, without having a whole lot of experience, like I basically told them I went to school for it.
Right.
I did sound at my church, and then they interviewed me over the phone, asking me a couple key questions.
Right.
And then I got in, so I was doing that for like a year, and then when I finally got out, I had a friend who was working at like a production company in Windsor and Detroit, and I was like, hey man, can you hook me up with some work? Like, I need it. And he's like, yeah, sure. And obviously he's not going to give me jobs that he would do, but if there was like an overflow thing and they needed someone, I'd go out. And one day I randomly got a call, like, hey, do you know how to use a PM5D? And that's the board I used on the ship. I was like, yep. I was like, all right, we're going to Alabama tomorrow. You're going to mix at an arena for, I always get mixed up if it was Drew Hill or Jodeci, but it was one of the two. So I mixed monitors. The show, the show went on okay. Horrible, like, load in. I messed some stuff up, like, rough day. So I started, like, working with that company, doing stuff here and there.
Talk to me about the cruise ship experience a little bit.
Well, that was, I thought it was good money, but looking back it wasn't. But it was awesome to be doing, like, what I wanted to do and actually being, like, employed.
Right.
But yeah, we would, you'd work for around 6 months without a single day off. You get certain days where you have like a good chunk of like hours off, and you just do the same circuit for like, I don't know. The first ship I was on did the same 2 places for the whole 6 months, which was super boring. It was Ensenada, Mexico, and Catalina Island.
All right.
And then the other ship was like a little different and cooler, but yeah, you basically get to see some of the nicest beaches in the world and
over and over
get
and
paid
over
all
again.
Expenses.
Nice.
I would get stuff mailed to my door, like Amazon Prime. You just put in the ship's home port address as your address,
right? With
your like underneath that in the second line, you put your cabin number and shit shows up.
Finds its way to you.
Dude, I full blown had weed brownies showing up. Not off of Amazon. There was a dude who was on our ship who would hook one of the dancers. He had like a friend in New York, and literally like to our door, you get like That's
hilarious.
I don't even smoke anymore, but like that shit was hilarious.
Was it a good like a learning experience for you?
Not a whole lot.
No.
You don't really get to do a whole lot on the ships.
Like, what were you doing while you were there? Like, you just sort of mixing for the entertainers or whatever?
Yeah. The first ship was kind of small, and I would do all the shows, and then me and 3 other techs would rotate on the comedy shows because there was like a back lounge where it was like very, very simple for the comedy. The second ship, I was in charge of like another tech, and I would do the big room shows, and he would do the small ones. And then you'd also have to go and maintain, walk around the ship and maintain the equipment, which I never did. Literally, like, I don't know, I'd walk around like once every 2-3 weeks, and just like, you walk the deck. I mean, I would fix stuff if it was broken, but I really think nothing was broken. There was like one time where some subs went out in like the comedy lounge.
Right.
But
nothing major.
No, you just walk around, and if everything sounds cool, and it's not corroding from salt water, and you just go about your day and mix your couple shows.
You said cruise ships were one of the 3 ways that people get into this business. What are the other 2?
Well, I said like one of the 5, and I don't even know if it's that, but it's like a typical thing. If you're starting off young, you start off with a cruise ship, you don't need a lot of experience. Another thing is starting off at a production company.
Okay.
So you're not going to be mixing, you're going to be pushing cases and soldering cables and learning how to wrap cables.
Right.
And then another one would be like starting at like a house gig, like for example, a bar in Windsor. If you have your own gear, or if you prove yourself, you can become a house guy. And then from there, each of those ways, I guess it is 3. Yeah. There's a lot more ways, but like from each of those different ways, you have little steps up. Like if you're doing a bar gig, a common thing, which happened probably a lot in the 70s or 80s, is like band comes through, like they like how you sound, like, hey, we just got signed to so and so, you want to come on the road, and then you go.
Right. Have you done any of those kinds of road gigs?
What do you mean?
Like, I mean, I guess you're kind of doing those kinds of road gigs right now, but have you done any like the get into a fucking van tours?
No, thank God I've actually was able to bypass that, which a lot of old guys, if they're listening, would probably be like, fucking kid. But I actually have a serious back issue, so I'm very thankful that I didn't have to do that.
So talk to me more about your path then. So you did the Alabama show, and then what? How did it move from there?
So I continued to work with that company or person, and then eventually I was introduced to a guy from Windsor who I already talked to on the phone, but never, I think, really met. His name was Joe, and I started kind of hanging out with him, kind of. He'd take me to the studio and show me some stuff. He had a studio in Windsor, and then I did like a couple one-offs with him where we would do like, I don't know, like the Fox Theater in Detroit. He would show me how to fly one side of the PA, I'd fly the other, but he would be programming the amps. I would just be like muscle. Okay. I would just be moving stuff, but I was smart enough to like ask the right questions and learn. Eventually he kind of saw that I wasn't a complete idiot, and then he had got an opportunity to go on a play tour, and he needed a guy, and he was like, you're my guy. Probably just because he had no one else. Like I'm not living in a fairy tale land where I'm convinced that I was the guy.
Right.
But that's how I got in, and that was a killer tour. That was a musical, and I wasn't mixing. The company, they were already on the road. They fired the previous audio company, or the previous one just like left.
Okay.
Mid-tour, literally shut their doors on their truck and drove off. So we came in. They already had a monitor guy. The front of house guy was Joe, and I literally just had to like tech, which I love to mix, but teching gigs are pretty much sweet because you just tech the rig, you set it up, and then you wait for something to break. You don't do anything during the show.
Right.
But I would walk the room with Joe and like help him tune the PA, because you can't be everywhere at once. And back then we weren't even using like calibration software. We were doing it by ear, almost just to prove a point. And I would walk the room with him, and I would call out frequencies to him on the radio. Like I'd go up in the upper balcony and be like, can you turn the top zone down, blah, blah, blah. And he started to realize that like I actually had a good ear and knew what I was doing.
Right.
And then from there, everything that he got, every like job that he got, he wanted me on.
Right.
And that's kind of where I'm still sitting right now.
It's interesting because you talk about your ear. One of the things that I found, like even just as in my journey as a musician, is when I first started singing and playing guitar and stuff, which was just fairly recently, about 4 years ago. Mm-hmm. If you would have asked me to like pick out anything other than the vocals or the drums from a song, I wouldn't have been able to do it. I wouldn't have been able to tell you this is the bass, this is the guitar, and not from like lack of understanding what a bass and a guitar is. I wouldn't have been able to hear what is what. Mm-hmm. And I noticed, over time, that those frequencies or whatever, I'm able to sort of like pick out more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Have you noticed, like, is it a learning experience for you kind of tuning your ear, or do you think it's more of a natural thing with people?
I think it's both. I was lucky enough to be probably like gifted with a little bit of a natural ability, but there is, no matter how good your ears are, if you don't know what you're listening for, you won't make sense of it. In fact, the school I went to, shout out to OEART, I think the first, like, they call it trimesters because there was like 3 of them, pregnancy, the babies.
Right.
The first trimester or the first like month of it or something, we weren't allowed to do anything. We had to learn how to listen.
Okay.
Legit. So they would play stuff for us. They would tell us what we're listening for. They would show us easy examples, and you would have to figure out what you're hearing and use words that are common to other engineers to describe stuff, almost so they can teach you like just the language. Because if you don't have the ear to hear stuff, you're kind of screwed, and it'll just take time. But if you do have the ear, and you just kind of need to be taught like how to describe stuff, like you don't want to be that one guy who's saying, "Oh, this sounds warm," but you're not describing what warm is.
Right.
You're just gonna mess everything up. But yeah, we had to learn like near versus far, bright versus dark, and like panning. Basically all like the 3 dimensions, or I don't know what you would call it, but like we would listen to songs. And back in the day, like hard panning was a big popular thing. I think like one of the Beach Boys songs that starts off that doom 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 doom, wouldn't it be nice? I think it's that one. It's like hard panned on one side, and the other side's like just the reverb. They would show us stuff like that, and like you'd have to learn to listen for stuff, and so yeah, sorry, long explanation.
No.
To answer your question, I think it's a combination.
But it's really interesting to me because going through that process to be taught how to listen for that stuff. Do you have an appreciation for, like, do you still find new, for lack of a better term, do you still find yourself hearing new frequencies? Do you find yourself, or is it a different process at this point for you?
I've just like, because I'm not like just starting out anymore, and I've kind of got the big picture of everything. Now I just dive into way more small details. Like I'll listen to a song and I kind of can't turn it off, which kind of sucks, but I'll listen to a song and I'll wonder what the attack setting on the compressor was. Right. Like really fine-tuning stuff, and that kind of stuff. So like I still think about those things, but I'm not hearing anything really new. Probably hearing less because I'm going deaf. But what? So yeah, for sure. Like still like picking at stuff, but not actually hearing new stuff. I'm just like getting it more in depth. Like it's all, for me, it's all a chase for the perfect like sound. And a lot of guys will just go and twist knobs and probably mix better than me, but I like to think about, and this is one thing they taught us at school, don't ever reach for a control until you know why you're reaching for it.
Okay.
If I'm listening to like a snare drum and I can hear that it's way too like clappy, or like I know that in my head, at the end of the day I'm going to turn knobs until it sounds good, but I know my first reaction on the compressor is going to be have a quick attack time, because if that snare is sounding too pointy, if you have a quick attack time on the compressor, it'll dull the peak. So like I have little formulas, and every sound guy has them. Right. But I've learned those kind of things, and like I've always been.
Is it a math thing for you?
Nah, it's just like there's general guidelines. Like if you wanted to get more tone out of a drum, you might use a really quick attack and a really quick ratio. So that means it's clamping down on the transient and then letting the ring. So if you had like Lars's horrible snare drum from Saint Anger.
I actually like that drum.
Yeah, it's cool. It's you'll never hear it and not know what it is.
Yeah, exactly.
But like if you wanted to, for some reason, get more and less,
right.
You would do those kind of settings, and you would eliminate the attack from the drum and accentuate or accentuate like other parts.
It excites you to know how to be able to do that, though, right?
Yeah, and I don't think there's like too many guys at like my level that are doing that don't know what those settings do.
Right.
But a lot of guys aren't actively, or I shouldn't say that. I just know for a fact a couple guys that I really admire that have amazing sounding mixes.
But
that they know that stuff, but they don't like reach for certain settings until like they'll just like, for me, for example, if I was in that scenario and I wanted to dull the transient, I would adjust the attack time before I even brought the threshold down.
Right.
The threshold's when the effect starts to happen.
Right.
Some guys might bring the threshold down just to get a little compression going and then sweep the attack. I would automatically like go to like 5 milliseconds or something and then adjust it and then fine tune.
Feather it in kind of thing.
Yeah.
The only way I can sort of even translate it in my head is kind of with like Photoshop and that kind of thing, where you
so many settings.
You know what I mean? You just figure out your settings, you figure out the things that work for you, and then you learn how to sort of dust them into whatever you're doing. Or do you kind of look at it more at a different level than that?
No, that's pretty much it.
Yeah.
But I just know things that'll work.
Right.
As far as certain ways to compress stuff, or it's just like, it's all about listening at the end of it. Like if you're here's a good example for Post Malone. The 2 acoustic songs he would play in his set were the first song, Finger Picking, Feeling Whitney is the song, and then he would go into Stay, which is sometimes he would use a pick, sometimes he wouldn't, but it's strumming. If I wanted to chase myself around all night, I wouldn't put a lot of compression. I would just ride it, you know? But how I approached compressing that guitar was, I basically, when I listened to the 2 songs, I said to myself, I don't want to have to touch anything. I want to set this, and it should mix itself. Only reason being, if something were to go wrong during the show, I could fix something and not worry about having to ride the fader while I'm fixing something. Mm-hmm. So what I would do on that is like I would set the threshold or the level where compression starts. I would set it just out of reach of his finger picking volume and then turn the ratio up to like a high ratio so that when he's doing his finger picking, it's not compressing at all. But then when he strums, it's compressing just enough to where those strummed chords are at almost the same level as the finger picking. So I could bowl the spaghetti and just...
I really, really hope that there's some sound engineers listening to this that have a fucking clue what you just said. Because to me, it's fascinating. I don't have an understanding of it at this level. You know, you might as well be speaking a different fucking language to me. But it doesn't change to me the fascination that I have. What I really like about your story, Blair, is that you can sit and just, like, you just so naturally fall into this conversation. It sort of says a lot about why you've gotten to the level you've gotten. Yeah,
I just love it. Like, part of me feels like guilty when I go off on those rants in front of people who don't know.
Right.
But it's kind of why I'm here, I guess, sort of.
Yeah.
Even though, like, the viewers don't need to know the nerdy stuff, but that is true, man. You gotta love it. You gotta be the guy who, after an 8-hour day or 14-hour day, goes back into his hotel room, loads up Pro Tools, plays back the stems from the show you just mixed, changes his settings, saves those, re-imports those onto his USB so that the next morning he can go in and change a couple small things before the show even starts.
You still do that?
You can. The way I was mixing post, I wasn't using software that would allow me to do that.
Right.
But there's certain boards where you can use what are called plugins, which are basically like, instead of a piece of rack gear, it's like a software version. Mm-hmm. There's certain boards that I've used where you can use plugins on the board, and my approach with that has always been only use plugins on those kind of boards, so that if I ever did want to edit stuff, I could just open those same plugins on Pro Tools or whatever software, make the adjustments, and then put them back in. Mm-hmm. I'm not using that kind of setup on that tour, so I actually couldn't. But
and you do, what is, like, for myself and for the general audience, what's the difference fundamentally between mixing front of house and mixing for monitors?
Front of house, as much as you have, sometimes 50,000 people behind you, you're only really mixing for like 2 people. You're mixing for yourself and the manager who might be standing next to you or might not, or the girlfriend that might be standing next to you, like the artist's girlfriend or something. As long as you can hear the vocal.
Do you have to put up with that? Do some people have to put up with that? Let's put it that way.
There's a known thing in the industry that Journey is really the Neil Sean show, and apparently his girlfriend stands next to the front of house guy and like even during parts of the songs where I guess where there's not guitar, like just asking for more guitar. I don't know those people personally. These are just stories I've been told from credible sources. I don't even remember who.
That's funny.
But no, like I mean, front of house, you're mixing for basically yourself. As long as the vocal's there and you got the kick and the snare, people aren't going to complain in the audience usually.
Right.
Monitors, you're the guy. If anything breaks, at a bigger tour like I was on, I have techs that are working with me to the point where if something breaks, I really don't have to move away from the board. But on a smaller tour, or the Europe dates I just did, I was the only guy, and anything that happens, you're on deck.
Right.
That's the main difference. Is like, I would almost say like, people say a studio versus live is like a controlled environment versus chaos. Front of house versus monitors is almost a similar thing. Even though they're dealing with acoustic issues because it's a big room, they don't, like at front of house, you don't have to deal with
like just shit falling apart on stage.
No, and if it falls apart at front of house, it's a horrible deal, but the artist might not never know.
Right.
So for me, it's just like, there's a lot of stuff going on, and I like it right now. Like, don't get me wrong, I want to mix front of house eventually, and I've done tours as front of house and shows. But
is it a hierarchy basically because like front of house is a little bit easy, like less sort of like labor intensive?
Yeah, it's like an easier gig in the fact that you're only mixing one mix.
Right.
But it's harder in the fact that that one mix has to be perfect.
Because for monitors, you're mixing for everybody on stage, individual mixes for everyone. Because you do in-ears and stage monitors,
stuff,
right?
Yeah. I mean, the post gig is not hard because I basically have 2 mixes. I've got post and then the playback guy. Post wants certain things a certain way. The playback guy wants everything coming from his playback rig at 0, so he can hear what he's doing. And then there's like a tech mix, which is like, again, it's post. It's exact same as post, but with just like our mics on it. Because I have a mic and the playback guy has a mic. We can all talk. So that's like, you're correct. That's the fundamental difference. For the tour I just did, I'm pretty much mixing one mix.
Okay.
So it's not
that bad.
And it's all playback. There's not a band. We did a band for Coachella.
Okay.
That was a nightmare shit. I should tell you about that.
Please do. I was just gonna say enough of the nerdy shit. Tell the people the fucking inside scoop shit that they want.
All right, here we go. You ready for name drops?
Yeah.
No.
Pick them up.
So, I was working with this artist, Super Duper Kyle. Which is probably what I was talking about mostly the time we were last sitting together.
Right.
I was coming.
Because you were on tour with him for quite a while, right?
I did a year with him.
Right.
Or about a year. I was just coming to the tail end of working with him, and at the same time as I was rehearsing for Coachella with him in LA, we were starting rehearsals for post-tour and post-Coachella show in LA. Kyle was playing the main stage on like the first day of the weekend. I think it was the Friday. That is the first day of the weekend, but I think Kyle was playing main stage Friday. Post was headlining a slightly smaller stage Saturday, and then Coachella's 2 weeks in a row, so he did the same thing. I had a commitment to Kyle to do his shows and to be at his rehearsals, so I had to miss like the very first Post Malone rehearsals. Like, I didn't meet him, my tech met him, and he was like, oh hey, this is what I was told, like, oh hey, you're my monitor engineer. And Justin, my tech, was like, oh no, he couldn't make, and like Post was like weirded out, I guess, but I had these prior commitments and all this stuff. Mid-rehearsal with Kyle, Joe, like the production manager for Kyle, and I was actually the front house guy for Post, he shows me a text, and I'm reading it, and it's like, Post wants a band for Coachella. And I know that I'm missing all the rehearsals, except for like one rehearsal, which Post was not at. It was a band rehearsal, and they were learning the songs. Right. So it was not a whole lot. So I basically missed all the rehearsals. We get to the show. The stage we were playing was a DJ stage where the entire stage is massive video walls. There's nowhere for a monitor guy to sit. So we get there. I've never met Post. I don't know what he likes in his ears. I listened to what my tech did during the rehearsals he was there for, and I was like weirded out by it, but he was like, no, this is how Post liked it because he was using crappy in-ears at the time, and we had to make it, whatever. So I do I get there to do the show, full band, can't see anybody, behind a wall, staring at a wall.
Oh, you're behind the video walls?
Yep.
Oh, okay.
And I've never met the dude, and I can't see anything. And the only thing that really saved everything was my tech was standing at the corner of the video wall, and he was able to see. And every musician had a talkback mic that no matter what I was doing, I had those mics on top of everything I was doing. So like if anyone would need something, the drummer would be like, Garrison, need more click. And I would, just do it. But that show went off pretty okay. Didn't really have, I don't think, any feedback. One thing that went wrong was he spilled beer on his DI, and so he couldn't play his acoustic song. So for the rest of the tour, his DI lived in like a Ziploc bag and all that shit. But yeah, that was like, it wasn't a nightmare, but like it was so hard to get through. Like I was trying my best, like, headlining show at Coachella.
Right.
We're on this, like, one of the second stages.
And this is the first time you're even dealing with this artist?
First time dealing with him, never met him, even after the show, because I didn't wire him up, because it would be like, why would I wire him up when the production manager's seen him for last week and he's more comfortable? Yeah, so that show, like, it went okay, but like it was so stressful, and I had people, it's Coachella, every celebrity and person's cousin is like right there backstage, and they're all bumping into you. I had a dude, Sway Lee does a song with Post called Spoil My Night. His auto-tune engineer showed up, I think, like 5 seconds before the show, saying that he wanted to like integrate his auto-tune rig into our system for Sway Lee's like one verse. Meanwhile, we're kind of like already going, and I just had to be like, what auto-tune rig do you have? And he showed me, and I was like, yeah, mine's better. Look, I have 3 of them. And I just gave him a mic. I was like, just use ours, put your settings on. I'm not dealing with this. There's no way. Don't even try to sweet talk me into it. I have the same rig as you, except better.
Right.
Import your preset, And he was cool with it. Nice. Just a lot of stuff, like,
last minute.
I'm probably leaving out important details, like, but it's just crazy way to.
Did you get to enjoy it at all?
I enjoy any time I get to mix a band, because you don't, sometimes in this kind of genre, you don't always get to. So I had fun with it. I love the like pressure and like, oh shit, kind of vibe, especially when you're actually doing good, but it's just like, it's evident to everyone that this is a crappy kind of day. Yeah. So like those are always good, because you're doing your thing. You feel, and if you pull it off, you get to be the hero at the end of the day, right? Or you just don't get to be yelled at. Oh, there's not a lot of praise. There's a lot of not getting yelled at. All right. Like even the day in Ireland the other day when my shit all went down, it's like, well, if you can't use a console that you're not used to on a show where there's no live band and it's just Pro Tools tracks, probably suck. Right. So. That's funny. So all right, so you get onto this tour with Post. You get through Coachella. Yeah, the very first show was the worst show. Yeah. That's the best thing about that whole story. And how did it go after? Like, did you end up getting to meet him? Like, not meet him, obviously you deal with him, but like, did you get to know him at all? Like, do you get to deal with the artist at that kind of level, or? It's kind of different, because on certain tours with an artist at that level, you probably wouldn't. Mm-hmm. But he happens to be like, I think the same age or a year younger than me. Mm-hmm. And he listens to the same kind of music I do in his spare time, and he's just an overall nice guy. Mm-hmm. So for that particular tour, yeah, he was just another guy. He was, you talk to him, wouldn't hang out a whole lot. I don't like to overstep my bounds, but yeah, at the same time, I was almost programmed from my last tour, from my tour manager who was on that tour, like how to act. Mm-hmm. And I was programmed like to know how to do stuff, and I had to almost kind of pull back on that, because like, at the end of the day, if the artist is standing there asking you to have a beer at the end of the show, you just have the fucking beer. Right. You don't go, oh no, I have to, like, So there was like little parts of that where I was like, I had to get used to that, like almost just loosening up, because I didn't want to be the dude. Mm-hmm. I'm not trying to get into pictures with him. I have a couple pictures with him. Right. But like, I'm not trying to get into pictures. I'm not trying to message him on his days off and see what he's doing. Right. Because there's people that do that. Not on our tour. I'm not trying to out anyone, but there's people that will try to pull that kind of stuff. Right. And it's just unprofessional, because like it creates such a complication. Like let's say I got fired from the tour from the PM, the production manager, for doing something bad.
Mm-hmm.
But I'd already gotten in really close with Post, and I went up to Post and say, yo, so-and-so fired me. Can you just hire me privately? That would be grounds for getting knocked out or shot. Like the person in charge, the PM, would be like, are you out of your fucking mind?
Mm-hmm.
You know, but there's people that'll do that kind of stuff.
Right.
And they don't last.
It's funny because that's not unique to that level of the business. Like I've legitimately had those sorts of conversations just about bar guys. You know what I mean? Like one guy
just wants to be seen,
or one guy gets pulled from a gig or whatever, and then goes around to try to backdoor into a gig that was, you know what I mean? Like shit like that, right?
It's funny.
It's funny that it happens all the way up to that level. Like you'd figure by the time you get to that level, the weasels might have been weeded out a little bit better. Unfortunately, not so much, eh?
There's always ways to do it. Like,
right.
There's always ways to flex without getting in trouble. Like, I'll flex every once in a while, or like, I'll post some picture of me, like, I don't know, at a cool place, or,
right.
There's always ways to still rub it into the faces of the people you went to high school with who
right.
talk shit, without being that guy who's actually like trying to get involved with people that you probably don't have a business getting involved with,
right. So let's rub some noses a little bit, because I know on this tour you got one kind of big name under your belt on this one, right?
Oh,
I shouldn't say one. Like Post Malone's pretty fucking big, but
yeah, you already know. Yeah, we talked about this earlier. Every year I try to go up with my career, and I always try to do something bigger. And after the last year with Kyle, I didn't know what I was gonna do, because we did like the Jimmy Kimmel show, we did the VMAs. I got to do a lot of cool shit, and this year I was like, I don't know how I'm gonna do it. And then when I found out I got the Post Malone gig, I was like, wow, this is awesome. Hopefully I actually, keep it. And like one of the things I said I wanted to do this year was mix Justin Bieber, and I got to do it. But it's not like I got hired and called by him.
Right.
It's just he has a song with Post called Deja Vu.
Okay.
And he came out to do the feature in LA.
Mm-hmm.
For those of you who don't know how this works, if you're touring and you do a show in LA, everything changes. As soon as you go to LA, we need different set pieces. We need this. There's going to be 19 guest artists. Like I had people come out during that show that don't even have songs with Post, that just did their own songs. Like Miguel came out. He just did his song Sky Walking on Them Haters, or whatever that song's called. He just like came out and did that song while Post kind of like took a Bud Light break. Like it's not even a feature. Like there's just all this shit. So, but yeah, anyways, Bieber had to do a song, and I had to mix his ears and his wedges or whatever.
Right.
And so that was cool.
Was it cool?
It was super cool, because like we were told in the beginning of the day, these are the features, and then after everyone like walked away, he didn't need to hear the next line. Our production manager got me and Joe and the playback guy, and was like, Justin Bieber's coming. Post does not know. It's going to be a surprise for him. All this stuff, because for those of you who don't know, and I think I'm going to be accurate with this, Justin canceled his tour that he was on like a year ago.
Okay. And
just like kind of quit music, and he hasn't done anything for like a year. He stayed in the shadows.
Right.
He started going to a church, and he just started doing his own thing.
Right.
And I think this was his like comeback onto the stage. This was his like thing. So it was a big deal, and it was supposed to be a lot cooler than it was. Don't get me wrong, it was cool, but we have this part of the show where Post walks off in the middle, and we play an interlude called Jonestown. During that time, he has a sip of water. I run over and check on him. I carry my spare ears in my hand behind my back and check in case he needs them. Usually he doesn't, and ask him how everything's doing. And then I walk back out. And then after that interlude stops, we go into Go Flex, I think, his song. And the whole way we were trying to do this, or at least my production manager said, was he doesn't know Justin's there. We're going to quarantine them or something.
Right.
Which didn't work. Right after Jonestown, instead of going into Go Flex, we're just going to play Deja Vu without telling Post, and Bieber's going to walk out, and he'll freak out as much as the crowd does. That didn't happen. I think as soon as Bieber got on site, Post found
heard
out.
about it.
Yeah, I mean, and those guys are super, super close friends.
Oh, okay.
Like very, very close.
Okay.
So like that part didn't get to happen, but other than that, it was still the whole same thing. They finished the interlude. Our lighting guy like hazed the stage up super, couldn't see shit.
Right.
And then like as the haze kind of like started to like dissipate, you would just see like this freaking dude with a mustache and a bandana wearing like a tie-dye shirt, and you're like, oh fuck, it's Bieber.
Really?
Yeah, he came out like this. He like literally came out looking at the lyrics like for the first little bit, and then he put it away because like he never sang that song in like a year or something.
Wow. That had to, was it as much of a moment as it sounds? Like that, did you kind of, or was it just another day at work?
For me personally, it was cool. Like, I mean, I used to never care about like Bieber, but then he came out with his last album, and I actually like kind of became a fan. Like,
I'm actually, it's funny because Bieber's name has come up a couple of times on the show, like right back into like early days when I was talking to Jordo 2 on like episode 7 or some shit, where we were talking about the idea of, you know, a lot of people shit on Bieber for whatever. But like, you take a 12-year-old kid out of like middle of fucking nowhere on Ontario and drop him into the fucking like
pile of
the
money.
hell pit.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it's a pile of money, and then plus like everybody around you wants a piece of you, and you're fucking 12. Like I was a piece of shit at 18, and I didn't have $1 billion.
Yeah.
Like,
oh, I get it at this point. Like,
Yeah.
wait, I wouldn't say proud of him because I don't know him, but
Right.
like I'm happy that he's no longer how he was, because like I remember watching, you know, TMZ back in the
Right.
day, like Justin Bieber at a restaurant pees in a mop bucket
Right.
while looking at a picture of Bill Clinton or whatever it
Yeah,
was.
whatever it was.
Like just like
Yeah.
shit like that. You're like, oh man, this poor kid. Like, what is he doing? But
yeah, that
seems to
last
be
album,
okay now.
that last album that when it came out, I believe he wrote all of it. Not that I do a lot of research on this shit, but I believe he wrote the majority of it on his own. And he was doing like a lot of the guitar work that got him started with it. Because that's the thing, like you can shit on Bieber as much as you want and talk about like all the money he had, but like at one point he was a 12-year-old kid playing guitar on YouTube.
Dude, at the end of the
Like-
day too, he is an amazing singer.
Yeah.
That's one of the only times in my life where I had known for a fact that there was no auto-tune on, because I was there.
Right.
But it sounded like there was.
You were
He was
saying
killing
this.
it,
Yeah,
man.
you were saying this. Explain that to me. Like, what do you mean when you say that?
He's just so accurate. Like, I mean, it doesn't take a super good singer to be able to sing a single note and hold it, but to be able to do these little riffs riffs. I was gonna say runs and riffs, but like
Right.
these little runs or riffs, whatever you want to call them, that he was doing, and they're very quick, and every single note that he went to was perfectly in tune, and it's just like I'd never seen that before. And I got my in-ear monitors in my ear, so I got a speaker this far away from my eardrum,
Right.
and I'm just like standing there. I'm just like, this guy's fucking amazing. He's good. He sings very quiet.
Yeah.
I had to gain his mic up, and there's like a lot of crowd bleeding through at that point.
Really?
Just because once you turn the mic up, everything comes through louder. But he's a pro, so he knows that means he has to hold his mic very, very close. All that shit, but he's a killer singer.
That's incredible.
It was cool. It was a cool
awesome.
moment. He was singing the Deja Vu line and adding a little like kind of flair to the end of it.
Yeah.
I was like, damn, this guy's the real deal.
That's awesome, man. All right, you're 9 days off, and then what? You're back on the road with Post?
Yeah, I think at this point I already spent a couple of those days, so I think at this point it's like a week left.
Right.
And I still haven't done the haircut or changed my winter tires on my car. That's like gonna be tomorrow. But yeah, we go to Japan in a week.
Really?
That's like a 5-day venture for one show. It's like travel day, off day, rehearsal day. There's actually a rehearsal for the fest. It's Fuji Rock. If anyone, this probably won't be up in time.
No,
I think,
not in
So
time.
you could stream it. It'll probably be online eventually.
Nice.
Show day, off day again, travel day. So it's like 5 or 6 days for
Do you
like
get to
1 hour.
Do you get to spend any time while you're there? Do you get to look around?
Yeah, that's what the off day is going to be for. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know if those days were there for some other reason, or if they just kind of threw us a bone saying like, hey, we realize this isn't Cincinnati, like you kind of should have an off day. This is probably
Right.
somewhere you might not ever go again.
Right.
So yeah, they gave us an off day, I think, on the front end and the back end,
Right.
so we can do stuff. And then I think Post and the A team, like the personal like security and his girlfriend, all those people,
Right.
I think they will probably be there even earlier. They're staying there for like 2 weeks or something like
yeah.
that. So yeah, there'll be time to go around, which should be fun. It'll probably be one of those funny like experiences because like we're so far from home that if Post himself does end up going out, that's probably where we will all go because we're not going to want to venture off if we don't have like our own translator or whatever. So it's like it'll probably end up being one of those funny times where it's like our crew and him and like a couple, like a promoter or something, and just eating stupid food that we shouldn't be eating.
It's amazing, dude.
That's what
I look forward to hearing about more of your adventures.
Thanks, man.
Thanks for hanging out with us.
For having me.
Again, brother.
Yeah.
Thanks, man.
Look forward to the next time we do it again.
For sure, man. That's that. All right, folks, that'll do it for this episode of the AVB Podcast. We hope you enjoyed it. If you did, be sure to go down and click on the subscribe button to make sure that you can continue seeing our episodes as we put them out. We do a lot of videos, and there's a couple of them here that we hope you'll enjoy. There's one up there that we think you might like, and of course, there's one of our playlists down there for you. Make sure you say hello to some of our sponsors in the links down below while you're there, and of course, you can find links there to today's guest and all of our other social media. Thanks for hanging out with us. We'll see you next time.